Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. I am really, really glad to be here. We are going to have yet another one of our amazing late night conversations. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I would really appreciate it if you all could tweet this out. We are going to have a great conversation tonight. Let's go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. We are off to a great start. We've already got 2 super chats right here. I'm going to write them down. But yeah, we've already got 2 super chats for me to answer in the second half of the show from holding on, still process. Hold on, still processing. And yeah, the way this works, for those of you who may not be familiar, is that I give my opening remarks. I say what's on my mind. We give kind of the basic opening stuff. And then from there, we do the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. I call you all out as I see you. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So during the opening of the show, I write your super chats down like you just saw me do. And then I answer them in the second half of the show after we do the roll call. That's the way the cookie crumbles here. That's the way we do it. It's the bee's knees. See you later, alligator. I'm just kidding, whatever. But that's the way we do things. So we're going to do it that way. So yeah, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. If you want to tweet this out or make it a Facebook status, bring more people, gather more people. Social media is rigged. Social media is rigged. It is completely rigged to make sure nobody watches this. So if we want to defeat that, we got to do everything we can. We got to do everything we can to beat the algorithm, to beat the algorithmic hack. It looks like we're going to be probably on Rumble soon because Rumble is less rigged than this outlet is. But yeah, they're not giving us any favors on YouTube, but that is not going to stop us. It's not going to stop us. We're going to keep marching ahead. Our community is on fire. We are moving ahead. We are marching ahead. We just had a great event here in New York City. We had a great weekend gathering in Missouri. And I want to share with you something really awesome that is starting tomorrow morning. Here's the link on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. Starting tomorrow morning, we are going to have morning messages every morning. That's our goal. It's quite a high bar goal. Not saying we can achieve it, but I think we can. I think we have a good chance. Every morning, there will be a 5-minute message from a different member of the Center for Political Innovation. A 5-minute message of revolutionary optimism to help you start your day as you drink your coffee. A 5-minute message from a CPI member every day. That is our goal. And the first one will go up tomorrow. And it's from me because I am the one who initiated the project. And the first one will go up tomorrow. It'll air at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you miss it, you can always watch it afterwards. But we want to have a 5-minute morning message every single morning so that people can start their day, drink their coffee, awaken with a positive, optimistic, anti-imperialist, constructive, socialist message every single day. That is what we are aiming to do. So I think you should go and subscribe to the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel right now, because that's where you're going to be getting these messages. And if you are a Center for Political Innovation member, you should think about making one, because we are going to need as many as we can get. One every day. Every single day, we want to do one of these messages. Every single day, we want to have a CPI morning message. Every single day. From a different person telling their perspective. Obviously, different people are going to do it multiple times, but that's the idea. So, yeah, the first one will air tomorrow morning. It will air tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. Catch it afterwards if you don't wake up that early. But it'll be there so that people can start their day. I'll even show you, we made a really nice, a very, very, very nice thumbnail. I'll show you the thumbnail that we made here. We made a lovely thumbnail to kind of represent it. Imagine waking up in the morning with this. Look at this. Look at this. Isn't this amazing? Morning message from the Center for Political Innovation. Isn't that great? We got our logo. We've got, a city, because we're the city building tendency. We got a sun rising. Yeah, that's how we're going to start the day. So go and subscribe to the CPI YouTube channel right now so that you don't miss them. And consider making one. If you're a member of the Center for Political Innovation, consider making your own. Obviously we can work with you. If you want to just take a whack at it and send it to us, or you want to consult with us first or whatever, we can work with you. If you're not a member of the Center for Political Innovation, maybe you ought to join. Maybe you ought to join so that you can help make the morning messages, because that's what we want to do. That is our new exciting project. We're thinking about having guest messages from like celebrities, people that are prominent, that are not members of the CPI, but sympathetic. It'll be like a surprise. You won't know it's coming. We're not going to announce who is doing them. I mean, obviously, I'm doing the first one. I just told you that, but we're not going to announce who is doing them beforehand. So every morning will be a surprise. And we want as few of them as possible to be done by me, because you guys hear from me on this YouTube channel all the time. You don't need a morning update from me, but we just want every day there to be a morning message from a Center for Political Innovation member, giving you positive vibes and optimism to start your day with. Revolutionary anti-imperialism, constructive city-building tendency socialism. And a number of people are already working on theirs. CPI President Elizabeth Young is working on one. We got other people, that are working on one. And people have all kinds of crazy ideas for what they want to do. It's really, really great. Some people are going to sing songs and play songs for us. Some people are going to tell us stories. Some people are going to read different quotes that they really like, or share different anecdotes. That's going to be amazing, right? And we say, let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? We want our membership to step up. We need to show people the value of this community. So we're going to start doing morning messages every single day. Every single day, a different CPI member will have another 5-minute morning message that you can start your day with. Revolutionary anti-imperialism to start your day. It will be awesome. It's going to be great. So go and subscribe to the CPI YouTube channel so that you can be getting a lovely morning message every day from the Center for Political Innovation. I'm very excited. I am very excited. You should be as well. And I think that this is quite an optimistic goal, to do it every single day, not weekdays, weekends too. We are looking to do this every single day. Every day. That is our goal. Now, I'm not saying we'll be able to reach it at first, But I think we can because we have some amazing people in our organization. If you watch any of the videos of our conferences, of our events, we have amazing people in our organization. And I think they can do this. And as they do it, they will get better and they will learn and they'll do it even better the next time. And they'll do it even better the next time. And our community will grow and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. It will be utterly amazing. I am so excited. So excited. So here's the link one more time. Here's the link. Go and subscribe. And starting tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, you don't have to watch it live. You can watch it afterwards, but it's going to premiere at 6 a.m. We're going to do one of these every single day. Every single day. Jamie says it sounds awesome. And Jamie is absolutely right. It is very awesome. We have an awesome thumbnail. It's going to be a great way to start your day. We are part of your life here at the Center for Political Innovation. We are not offering you pessimism and cynicism. We're not offering you, cringe vibes, making fun of other people. We are offering you a community of solidarity, anti-imperialism, struggle. That's what we're offering you here. And this is the next step toward offering the world what it really needs right now, which is the city building tendency, a message of peace, a message of anti-imperialism, a message of socialism, constructive socialism. So yeah, that was the first thing I wanted to talk about there. I just wanted to do a thing for that. Now I wanted to get into my opening remarks at this point, right? Start my opening remarks. Got 3 super chats already. If you got more things you want me to talk about in the second half of our show, shoot me another super chat and I will do my best to answer it in the second half of the program. But I'm just going to jump into my opening remarks. Ray Epps. Ray Epps. Ray Epps. Ray Epps. Do people know who Ray Epps is? Well, you should know who he is. Who is he? Well, he's a guy who was in the Capitol. He was not actually in the Capitol, but he was around the Capitol on January 6th. And he was going around on January 6th telling people, we need to go into the Capitol. We need to go into the Capitol. And he was walking around on January 6th saying, we need to go into the Capitol. That's what we need to do. We need to actually go into the Capitol building. At one point, he got up and said, we need to go into the Capitol. And all the Trump supporters around him started chanting, Fed, 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 Fed. They knew he was a provocateur. And he was on the FBI's wanted list. They had images of him. Ray Epps. They had images of him. And this was a guy who was going around urging people to enter the Capitol building on January 6th. And the New York Times loves him. And he hasn't been arrested by the FBI. And many people think this guy was a provocateur. They think this guy was sent in. He was an informant. The FBI has never arrested him. And now he's suing Fox News because Tucker Carlson did a story on it. It's funny. The New York Times tends to hate people who went into the Capitol on January 6th. Trump supporters, January 6th protesters. They love Ray Epps. And the FBI has arrested all kinds of people over January 6th. In fact, there were people that I interviewed who had their homes raided, guns drawn, guns pointed in their face. They didn't even go into the Capitol. They were on Capitol grounds. They didn't even go into the Capitol. All kinds of Trump supporters are sitting in jail, rotting in jail because of the January 6th events. But this guy who is on many, many videos walking around telling people, we need to go into the Capitol. Not only has he not been arrested, but the New York Times and others are sticking up for him and saying, oh my God, it's a conspiracy theory. And that's what they always do. If they don't like something that you're saying, they say, well, there's this conspiracy theory. Well, I don't know what's false here. Does Ray Epps exist? Yes. He lives in Arizona. Is he in videos urging people to go into the Capitol? Yes. Has he not been arrested, unlike countless other people? Yes. So what are we wrong about? What are we wrong about? He's in videos urging people to go into the Capitol. He is a real person, and he has not been arrested. Where are we wrong in saying that looks sketch as hell and he might be an informant? Where are we wrong? Where are we distorting the facts about this? I've covered it for RT. Tucker Carlson has covered it. Where are we wrong about Ray Epps? Where are we wrong? What are we wrong about? The FBI director, when interrogated before Congress, wouldn't say that there weren't informants inside the Capitol building before the doors were opened. That's interesting. He wouldn't answer the question when they pressed him about FBI provocateurs dressed up as Trump supporters. January 6th is looking more and more like a false flag, like a Reichstag fire than ever. And we don't have to agree with the January 6th protesters and their belief that, Biden's a communist or something like that. We don't have to agree with them to admit that. Where in hell did the memo get sent out that says part of being a socialist now is loving the FBI? Let me repeat that question. Where in hell did the memo get sent out that says in order to be a socialist, you have to love the FBI? Last time I checked, the FBI murdered Fred Hampton. Last time I checked, the FBI was created by J. Edgar Hoover to fight communists. Last time I checked, the FBI's COINTELPRO program was used to frame up and ruthlessly suppress communists and black revolutionaries, people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So how in the hell did the memo get sent out that as communists, as leftists, we're supposed to support the FBI? The FBI is currently prosecuting the Uhuru movement. The People's Democratic Uhuru movement, a group of black revolutionaries, are being charged with being Russian agents. They're facing 10 years in prison just for having some Zoom calls, just for running in elections. But social media is dominated by doofuses like Jabba the Vosh. You must support the FBI. You must support the FBI or else you're a Nazi. And that is the memo, right? Sam Cedar, the Young Turds. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, ContraPoints. That's the memo. If you say that the FBI killed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you're spreading conspiracy theories. You must be a right-winger. I'm Jabba the Bosch. How did we get here? How in the world did we get to this point? The FBI raided the homes of the Freedom Road Socialist Organization in 2010. A group of Palestine activists who march in solidarity with Cuba and Venezuela, anti-imperialists. They got dragged out of their houses with guns in their faces, had all their laptops and their computers stolen by the FBI. It was revealed that Hal Turner, the neo-Nazi, Al Turner was just this neo-Nazi guy on an internet radio show. Turns out he was doing it for the FBI the whole time. He was an FBI informant. The FBI paid millions of dollars to this white supremacist guy to have a radio show and go around the world setting up meetings so that the FBI could spy on people. Millions of dollars were paid out to Hal Turner to be an FBI neo-Nazi. Leonard Peltier is sitting in federal prison for a crime he did not commit. This is a Native American activist, a leader of the American Indian movement. And even his prosecutor will not say he actually believes Leonard committed the crime. Many people have looked at the case and said that the FBI agents were killed by friendly fire. The FBI shot itself. But they blamed a Native American activist named Leonard Peltier. And so he's been sitting in federal prison. The first group of Native Americans that were arrested were acquitted by the federal jury. But Leonard Peltier, who had fled to Canada, he was extradited from Canada. They had a whole new trial. They came up with a whole new pack of lies and distortions, and they convicted Leonard Peltier. And Bill Clinton, I will have you remember, Bill Clinton was going to free Leonard Peltier, announced that he was considering freeing Leonard Peltier. And so the FBI director, Louis Freeh, mobilized hundreds of FBI agents to go to the White House and basically threaten Bill Clinton. Hundreds of FBI agents assembled at the White House for a protest against the commander-in-chief. What is that image of hundreds of guys who get to carry firearms, who work for an intelligence agency surrounding the White House? What does that sound like? That sounds like an awful lot more like a coup attempt than, January 6th, guys farting in Nancy Pelosi's chair, and that happened. And Bill Clinton backed down from offering to free Leonard Peltier. Thank you. I got another super chat on the rock friend from Daniel J. Thoughts on the EU Parliament member Schwab, Greta Soros, nature restoration law to communism. I see a consistent theme in these super chats tonight, but that's okay. Writing it down. All right. But the FBI is not a friend of progressive people in any conceivable sense. If you are an advocate of workers' rights and the labor movement, you should not be a fan of the FBI. If you're an advocate of black liberation, you should not be a fan of the FBI. If you are someone who's been involved in the anti-war protest movement, you should not be a fan of the FBI. You support Palestine, read about what they did to Electronic Intifada, read about what they did to the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. You should not be a fan of the FBI. You support the Uhuru movement, and you see how outrageous the charges against them are. You should not be a fan of the FBI. But now, if you're a leftist, you must support the FBI. In fact, so much so that Vaush has gone out of his way to try and convince his audience to support the charges against the Uhuru movement. We in CPI are doing everything we can to raise the Uhuru case from the heavens, that a black revolutionary organization is indicted. We've sent our members to confront Marianne Williamson about it on 2 occasions. Members of our organization, Noah in Boston, John in Chicago, both confronted Marianne Williamson about the case. We've been on social media urging RFK to bring up the Uhuru movement when he testifies on Thursday. And you should do that, by the way. RFK is testifying before Congress on Thursday about the weaponization of the judiciary. Demand that RFK talk about the Uhuru case. Tweet at RFK about it, because if they can imprison the Uhuru movement, they can basically jail anybody. We've been doing everything we can. We just had an event in New York City. First speaker. The first speaker was actually, it was a report, an activist report from Liam, but then he introduced somebody from the Uhuru movement. The Uhuru movement took to the floor. We had an event in Washington, D.C. The Uhuru movement was there. We had an event in Washington, D.C. on February 19th, an after party for Scott Ritter. And who spoke? The Uhuru movement. We have been doing everything we can to support a group of black revolutionaries who've been charged with being Russian agents. Meanwhile, BreadTube has been doing everything they can to create a public relations campaign to justify jailing them on charges of being Russian agents. Now, it is really beyond me, and my patience is really running out with people who cannot get it through their heads that the so-called left is completely under the control of the American government. It is obvious. I was the first person to say it. I wrote the book BreadTube Serves Imperialism because I found out that Dr. Steve Hassan, who's a long-time intelligence asset, was mentored by Robert J. Lifton, the military psychiatrist who basically is responsible for the brainwashing scare. I revealed that he was advising BreadTube. And then Gray Zone was handed documents, was presented with documents showing that Abigail Thorne is on the payroll of the British royal family and British intelligence-controlled foundations that are paying Abigail Thorne, a.k.a. Philosophy Tube, to do her work. I have been 100% vindicated. I am 100% correct about this. BreadTube, the voices of socialism that have been presented to us, that get hundreds of thousands of views on their videos, even though they don't understand basic Marxist concepts. These people have been propped up and promoted by the American government. There is no question about it now. We have the smoking gun memos, and now they joke about it. They laugh about it. They think it's funny now. ContraPoints laughs about it. Oh, I'm working for the CIA. You're not. I know you're trying to laugh it off, ContraPoints. But then I didn't just see, but we all saw that Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, wife of former President Bill Clinton, biggest establishment Democrat ever, Hillary Clinton did a segment for Netflix about how amazing ContraPoints is. At this point, there is no question that BreadTube is a government operation. And if you don't think that BreadTube is a government operation, your head is in the sand. And if you make fun of me now for saying that, you are such a doofus, I don't know what to tell you. I was right. I was 100% right. I didn't even know how right I was. I just knew about Steve Hassan. I didn't know about Abigail Thorne. I didn't know about Hillary Clinton and ContraPoints. I was more right than even I realized. That's how right I was. I was so right that it rocked them. It shook them. They flipped out when I wrote my book, BreadTube Serves Imperialism. I have never had so much attention given to a book that I wrote. They have whole streams where they take sentences out of context and claim that they say things they didn't say. I mean, they lost their minds because of my book, BreadTube Serves Imperialism, because I caught them with their pants down. ContraPoints works for the government. Vosh works for the government. Thought Slime works for the government. Abigail Thorne should register as a foreign agent because she works for the British government. I was amazingly correct. I was 100% right about everything. I mean, I couldn't have been more right, right? I couldn't have been more right. I used very modest language to say it looks like one section of our ruling class and possibly the intelligence apparatus seems to be promoting BreadTube because I have this inside information that this guy who is associated with kidnappings and the Cult Awareness Network and was sent to harass the LaRouche movement and is the big cult guru and is not a credible, source, and his ideas about cults have all been debunked by academics. This guy, Dr. Steve Hassan, is advising them, so it looks probably like this is some kind of government thing. That's all I said. And I said it in very careful, meandering language. That's what I said. And now it is so obviously correct. And they don't even dispute it anymore. They have nothing to say, right? They want to talk about my sex life. That's what they want to talk about because that's all they've got. That's all they've got. Well, you know what? Vosh is a literal pedophile, so he ought to shut the fuck up, right? And we have video of him calling for the legalization of child pornography. We have former friends, we have former friends who have come forward and have said that Vosh admits viewing child pornography. I mean, Vosh was sending pictures of his genitals to underage girls. I mean, Vosh is a literal pedophile, okay? And there's all kinds of evidence of that. But he gets a pass. He gets a pass. And meanwhile, people want to talk about my private life as if that matters, right? That's all these people have. That's all these people have. Sophie from Mars, she has done ridiculous, idiotic hit pieces where she claims that I just disappeared. She claims CPI is still dissolved. She claims I don't work at RT anymore. It's like you want to listen to these hit pieces, right? And it's like, and then CPI no longer exists. Check out our YouTube channel. We just had a big, huge event. We've been having events. We've been back in business since November. We barely took 2 months off. False, right? Oh, Caleb no longer works at RT. I've been working at RT this whole goddamn time. You ever watch RT? I'm on RT every day for false. Caleb claimed that COVID was invented in the biolabs in Ukraine. Never said that. All I ever said is that they have biolabs in Ukraine, which they do, and Victoria Nuland has admitted it. I mean, they just lie. They just lie. They 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 lie. And they just lie. That's all they do. They lie, and they get boosted in the algorithms. Why? Because Matt Taibbi has proved that their buddies in the FBI are sitting there deciding who goes viral, who doesn't, who gets canceled, who gets boosted. What more evidence do you need? I mean, I have never been more right in my life, right? Not only was I right about the fact that BreadTube serves imperialism, that BreadTube works for the American government, but I was also right about the fact that the FBI is rigging social media algorithms to help them. I was right about that too. We now have proof of that. Matt Taibbi has proven that. I should get a medal for being right, right? I was beyond right. I was so right, it shocks me sometimes, okay? The FBI is rigging social media. Vosh is running interference to build up public support for the FBI prosecution of the Uhuru movement. ContraPoints is getting hugged by Hillary Clinton. Abigail Thorne is getting money from the British royal family and British intelligence. All I ever said is, Steve Hassan's advising them, so maybe there's a connection here. That's all I ever said. The focus of my book was not on that. The focus of my book was on their ideas, and they don't understand what socialism is. They don't understand what fascism is, and they promote degrowth, which is inherently contrary to everything that Marxism stands for. That's what my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism, said. That's what my book was about. You can go listen to it. Great audio book that someone did. It's here on the YouTube channel. Great member of our community. Great CPI member did an audio book. A beautiful audio book recording. It was kind of a collaboration. Different members of the community. They did a great job. My book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism. I mean, it should be like required reading. It should be winning awards. I should be getting an award for Bread Tube Serves Imperialism because my work there was so obviously right on and so obviously correct. I should be getting a medal. So if you haven't read it, go read it and go listen to the great audio recording, the audio book. Let me pull up the audio book for all of you, right? I've got an audio book of it. So let me just pull it up. Hold on. Hold your horses. I'll link you the audio book. But I deserve a medal for this. I really do, right? And the only reason I am not winning huge awards for my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism, is because all the awards are also rigged. So maybe somebody should invent an award to give to me for my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism, because I was so correct. So there you go. There's the audio book. Go and listen to it. Right? Go and listen for yourself. I hit the nail on the head. It's a great audio book that was done by members of our community. Go and listen to the audio book. I was absolutely correct. So I just wanted to get that out of my system, right? If you're watching this, you know that I was right. You know that Peter Coffin was right. You know that Gray Zone was right. We were right. We were absolutely right. And you know what? I kind of wish we weren't right. As much as we're going to sit here and go, I told you so, it still sucks. It sucks that social media is rigged against us. It sucks that people who preach socialism but practice fascism to serve capitalism for the bosses. It sucks that they're the voices of socialism. That's an old rhyme I learned from an old socialist, right? This is part of the socialist American lexicon, right? The story goes back in the early 1930s, the Communist Party was focused on opposing social democrats. And they wrote a rhyme. The cloak makers union is a no good union. It's a company union by the bosses. Those right-wing cloak makers, they are socialist fakers who play upon the workers' double crosses. The Hillquits, Dubinskys, and the Thomases are making the workers false promises. They preach socialism, but they practice fascism to preserve capitalism by the bosses. Hoo-ha. Classic Yiddish American socialist rhyme calling out the Socialist Party of America. Reverend Norman Thomas, the Episcopalian priest, was a longtime leader of the Socialist Party of America, a vicious anti-communist. Morris Hillquit was an intellectual associated with the Socialist Party, and Dave Dubinsky was the leader of the Cloakmakers Union. He was the leader of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union also, right? I believe he was a prominent labor unionist in New York City. And he was a racist. That's one thing about Dave Dubinsky. Dave Dubinsky, he worked very hard to keep black people out of the, it used to be in the area of New York City, they now call Chelsea, and a little bit further up from there, right? You get around West 27th Street, West 28th Street, around that area. There used to be a lot of garment factories. They call that the garment district. And there used to be a lot of garment factories in that area. There aren't anymore. There used to be, and there's still a lot of garment stores. You can still buy a lot of fabric in that area. There's a lot of stores that sell fabric in that area. But there used to be, there were a lot of factories that made clothes in that part of New York City and Chelsea. They were unionized. There were unions. And the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, the ILGWU, that was union, and it came out of, I don't know if you remember, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. Now, there was a horrendous fire in the early 1900s near the area of what's now called Washington Square Park. There was a horrendous fire, and a number, hundreds of women burned to death because the bosses wouldn't, locked them in, didn't want them to be taking breaks or whatever, so it locked them in and they burned to death. It was a big outrage. That's where International Women's Day, March 8th, comes out of that. And the International Garment Workers Union, International Ladies Garment Workers Union, ILGWU, it comes out of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, but it was the ILGWU was dominated by a guy named David Dubinsky, and David Dubinsky was a corrupt unionist. And from what I understand, this is kind of fascinating history. That area of New York City, right, Chelsea, and the Garment District, where there were a lot of immigrants, around 1920, 1930s, 1940s, up into the 50s and 60s, even up into like the 80s. You still had garment factories in there. They started closing down in the 90s. Now most clothes are made overseas, but it used to be, and there was a lot of clothing made in New York City. And the Garment District, was where the clothes were made. And you would have these little factories where women would sit with sewing machines all day. And they were usually immigrant women. In the 20s and 30s, they tended to be from Eastern Europe or Ireland. And then, starting in like the 50s and 60s, they tended to be from Latin America. And you had women sitting at sewing machines all day sewing clothes, in these garment factories. And the mafia was very heavily involved in that area because, the labor unions were run, the Communist Party started its own garment workers union to oppose the ILGWU, which was run by David Dubinsky. And there was frequently a fight between the different garment workers unions and the mafia. And the mafia would be hired by the bosses sometimes to break the strikes. Other times, the mafia would be, working with the Socialist Party and their labor union to work against the communists. And it was quite violent in that area. People got killed in labor struggles. The fight, among the garment workers unions, that area. And, it's funny. I walk through that area sometimes. I walk through Chelsea. And I walk through the Garment District, 24th Street, 25th Street, 7th Avenue, 8th Avenue. If you've ever been to that area in New York City, you would never know it now. Now there's a lot of posh restaurants where rich people eat, but that used to be a very, very working class area. And it used to be where there was a lot of labor organizing, a lot of organized crime, a lot of assassinations, and the Communist Party and the Socialist Party had a lot of influence among the labor unions there, and it was not simply an intellectual debate. I mean, people got killed. Members of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union were killed by communists. Communists were killed by members of the ILGW or supporters of David Dubinsky. The communists were demanding that black people be hired to work in the Chelsea. In the garment factories, and Dave Dubinsky wanted to keep the unions whites only. I mean, this is all history that we've all forgotten about. And what's interesting is, I talk on here a lot about Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party. Sam Marcy. Well, Sam Marcy, he apparently did spend a lot of time in Chelsea organizing garment workers. He was a labor union lawyer. Sam Marcy had been in the Communist Party, didn't get along with the Communist Party, so he became a Trotskyite, but he never really fit in among the Trotskyites because they were very anti-communist. But I understand that in the late 30s, Sam Marcy spent quite a bit of time as a lawyer working in Chelsea, and that he dealt with the mafia, and that it was quite difficult to be a labor organizer in New York City during those years. This is important history that we don't talk about. People forget how much of a struggle it was to get basic industrial unions for workers in this country, and the meat packing facilities and the sweatshops and in the auto plants and the steel mills. People forget all this important history. And if you look into that history, you'll understand how important the Communist Party was. Because the Communist Party, they They are the ones who got those steel. This is one pet peeve of mine, big pet peeve of mine in the mainstream media. And all the politicians do it. The Democrats, the Republicans, Tucker Carlson even does this. They'll start saying, well, the good jobs are all gone. The good jobs are all gone. The steel mill jobs, the auto plant jobs, those jobs are all gone. Those were not always good paying jobs. There's nothing magic about steel mills that means that you get paid a lot to work there. Nothing. There's nothing magical about auto plants that says, oh, if you work there, you make a lot of money. In the 1920s and the 1930s, up into the 1950s, the people who worked in the steel mills, the people who worked in the meat packing facilities, the people who worked in the coal mines, people who worked in the auto plants, they were making very low wages, poverty wages. Those were not good paying jobs. The reason they became good paying jobs was because the communists got involved. And the communists knew how to play hardball. There's a beautiful bumper sticker. I love it. I want one. It's from the 80s. Communist group made it in the 80s. It has a picture of a baseball bat. And it says, when labor plays hardball, workers win. And that is so true if you look at the history of this country. Because the business unionism and the reformist unionism didn't cut it. But when labor started to play hardball, that's when workers learned how to win. That's how workers won. In the 1930s, the workers would go on strike. Usually when there's a strike, what happens? Well, the workers, they stop working and they start marching outside the plant with their signs. And the police, escort in replacement workers. And then, sometimes the communists might try to block the replacement workers and they get arrested, whatever. But in the 1930s, late 1930s, 1936, 1937, the communists adopted a new tactic. The CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO, they adopted a new tactic. Instead of going outside the plant and protesting, what did the workers do? They sat down. They occupied their factories. They had what was called a sit-down strike. They occupied their factories. If the boss won't talk, don't take a walk. Sit down, sit down. If they give the can to a union man, sit down, sit down. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down and have a seat. Sit down, you got 'em beat. Sit down, sit down. They would occupy their factories. And the workers would sit in the factory. They would hold the factory, the plant hostage to get their demands. That tactic of the sit-down strike wave, that was a very important moment in American labor history. That's why we have auto workers unions, the United Auto Workers. They won a contract at Chrysler and eventually at Ford with sit-down strike tactics. The steel workers unions. Steel workers, they didn't have a union. But they occupied their factories and they fought militant strikes in places like Youngstown, Ohio. Bet you didn't know this, but in Youngstown, Ohio, the steel workers shot down an airplane. This is a historical fact. In Youngstown, Ohio, the steel workers shot down an airplane. The way the plant is set up, it's a very big area. So the bosses started flying the scabs over in airplanes. And the communists, Gus Hall and his union buddies, they got their hunting rifles. They shot down an airplane. They shot a scab airplane out of the sky. It was flying pretty low. It didn't, it wasn't a long flight. They shot a scab airline out of the sky. You want to talk about labor militancy. You want to talk about working class action on the job. Gus Hall William Z. Foster. These guys, they were the Viet Cong. They were the Palestinians. They were Hamas. They were the Houthis. They were Che Guevara. They were in the hills of Youngstown, Ohio, in the woods with their hunting rifles, shooting down airplanes. That's the history of our class, the working class. That's the history of our movement. That's our people. That's the movement this guy was talking about. There's nothing in this book about transgender bathrooms. There's nothing in this book about fat phobia. There is nothing in this book. Nothing in this book about that shit that speaks in the name of leftism. Nothing. When you read this book, this is the book. This is the book of the man who made China what it is today, a superpower. This is the book of the man who drove Japan out of China, and then he drove Chiang Kai-shek all the way to Taiwan. You go and read yourself the Little Red Book. It has absolutely nothing to do with wokeism. Nothing to do with wokeism. And in fact, I want to read you something. This is from chapter 2 of the Little Red Book. This is Mao's book, Mao's Little Red Book, quotations from Chairman Mao. This is the Little Red Book, Mao's quotations that he wrote. This was the most widely read book at the time that Mao was in power. During the Cultural Revolution in China, this was the most widely read book. So I want to read you. This is a quote from the Little Red Book. This is from chapter 2 of the Little Red Book. This shows you how important what we do in this country is. Of all the things that Mao can write about, he's talking. This is the Little Red Book. This is the quotations of Chairman Mao, the book that everyone carried around with them during the Mao era, still widely read. Quotations from Chairman Mao. Let me find the quotation. This is on page 10 of the Little Red Book. Page 10 of Mao's Little Red Book. What is he saying? In the final analysis, national struggle is a matter of class struggle. Among the whites in the United States, he's talking on page 10 of the Little Red Book about white people in America. Among the whites in the United States, it is only the reactionary ruling circles who oppress black people. They can in no way represent the workers, the farmers, the revolutionary intellectuals, and other enlightened persons who comprise the overwhelming majority of white people. Let me read that again. In the final analysis, national struggle is a matter of class struggle. Among whites in the United States, it is only the reactionary ruling circles who oppress the black people. They can in no way represent the workers, farmers, revolutionary intellectuals, and other enlightened persons who comprise the overwhelming majority of white people. Mao just kicked the crap out of wokeism. Mao just owned wokeism. Wokeism says that all white people are bad that all white people have their white privilege. It says, oh no, we can't talk about class struggle. That's fascist. That's class reductionist. But on page 10 of a book that was dedicated to China and the Chinese people, Mao goes out of his way just to make clear that when it comes to racism in the United States, racism is a tool of the bosses to oppress the working class, and that the target in opposing racism should be the ruling class, not working people who make mistakes, not working people who are confused. It is the ruling circles, the ruling elite, the imperialists who oppress black people. The fact that this was selected, right? The Little Red Book was originally blue, and it was part of your military kit. When you joined the army, they gave you a kit. They gave you a gun, they gave you a uniform, and they gave you this book. And it was originally blue, and it was part of their political education in the army. And it was quite popular in the army. It was assembled by Lin Biao, who was considered kind of Mao's right-hand man during the Cultural Revolution. And so they introduced it among the civilian population, and they made it red because red is the more communist color. And on page 10 of the Little Red Book, Mao took a bite out of wokeness, right? All these woke assholes who sit there, and they're all white too, right? From a person of color, if a person of color wants to express resentment or criticism against white people, I respect that. But all these rich white kids who sit there and go, I hate white people. Oh my God. Like I hate Trump supporters and white people. And I am so amazingly woke and I feel so amazingly guilty. And all these rich, liberal, intellectual hipster kids, all of them, Mao wanted nothing to do with. Look, I will tell you, I said this on Kim Iverson's show when I was on it to talk about my new book. Hold on. I was on Kim Iverson's show. And I quoted the fact that when I was in college, I remember I went to an anti-war protest. There was a librarian at the college who was a friend of mine, older fellow, but he spoke both Vietnamese and Chinese fluently. A very great man. Remember, he was driving through Cleveland, so he offered to give me a lift, pick me up. He offered to give me a lift. And so he picked me up from the anti-war rally, this older man. And I remember this older man, what he said. And he told me, I remember he looked at the people that were at the anti-war protest. And I remember he said to me, Caleb, these people, they don't know what communism is really about. Said if communism ever came to America, these people that are at this anti-war protest, they would be the first people to oppose it. And he said to me that if Mao Zedong if he were alive today and living in America, if Mao were alive today and living in America, he would go to the poorest corner of Appalachia, the poorest part of West Virginia or Kentucky and Appalachia, and he would start the George Washington Bible Gun Club. And I heard that, and I thought, what? That doesn't make any sense. But the more you understand communism, and the more you visit socialist countries, the more you realize how true this really is. The synthetic left is a complete distortion. It's a complete distortion of Marxism, right? Complete distortion of Marxism. Has nothing to do with Marxism. Right? It is a complete distortion. The synthetic left has nothing to do with Marxism. Marxism is the tradition of the people who defeated the Nazis in World War II, the people who invented space travel. Marxism is the tradition of Gus Hall and William Z. Foster and the people who shot down those airplanes. Marxism is the tradition of the Black Panthers, whose first big public demonstration was a pro-Second Amendment gun rights rally, who wore uniforms and marched in lockstep. All the things that trigger the synthetic left, who support the actual Nazis in Ukraine, who support the FBI and suppressing our freedoms, all the things that trigger them are things that the actual genuine left did. These people have nothing to do with it, and we need to break with them, and we need to make friends with conservatives, because conservatives right now are opposing the wars. I've made friends with a conservative church in New York City that wants peace with North Korea, and they don't quite know what to make of me, I don't think, but you know what? They're good people, and they have been attacked, and they want to make peace with North Korea. And we just had a great event in New York City. They gave us the space for the event. They arranged for us to get the space for the event. That's amazing. You know what I mean? We have got to make friends with what will eventually be the anti-monopoly coalition, working people coming together to drive out the imperialists. That's what we've got to do. So on that note, folks, I'm going to put on some music. I'm going to put some old Woody Guthrie music on. This is not actually Woody Guthrie. This is someone performing a Woody Guthrie song. And then from there, we'll do the roll call, and then I'll start answering super chats. So if you got more super chats, I've only got 5 here so far. So if you got more super chats, send them my way. But yeah, we'll do. I'm in the mood for Tear the Fascist Down. So let's hope this is a good cover, right? You can't ever play the actual one because that recording, they always give you troubles. This is some guy playing Tear the Fascist Down.
There's a great and bloody fight around the whole world tonight, and the battle and bombs and shrapnel rain. Hitler told the world around he would tear our union down, but our union's gonna break them slavery chains. Our union's gonna break those slavery chains. I walked up on a mountain in the middle of the sky. I could see every farm in every town. I could see all the people in this whole wide world. That's the union that'll tear the fascists down. That's the union that'll tear old Hitler down. When I think of the men and the ships going down, the Russians fight on across the dawn. There's London in ruins and Paris in chains. Good people, what are we waiting on? Good people, what are we waiting on? So I thank the Soviets and the mighty Chinese vets, the Allies, the whole wide world around. To the battling British, thanks, you can have 10 million Yanks if it takes them to tear the fascists down, down, down. If it takes them to tear the fascists down. But I think of the men and the ships going down, and the Russians fight on across the dawn. There's London in ruins and Paris in chains. Good people, what are we waiting on? Good people, what are we waiting on? So I thank the Soviets and the mighty Chinese vets, the Allies, the whole wide world around. To the battling British, thanks, you can have 10 million Yanks if it takes that to tear the fascists down. If it takes that to tear old Hitler down, down, down. If it takes that to tear the fascists down.
Very good stuff. Here's the link, by the way. David Fox is asking for the link. That's the link, so I just posted it in the chat. That's a great version. I don't know who this fellow redhead is. If he's in CPUSA, they'll probably get mad at him for me playing it. I have nothing to do with him, but I just saw he did a good version of Tear the Fascist Down by Woody Guthrie, so I just posted it. But yeah, that was really, really great. And that just reminds me of, the best years in the United States when we had Roosevelt as the president, when we were aligned with Russia, aligned with China to defeat fascism. So different than today. So different than today. Because right now we are on the wrong side in Ukraine. We are on the wrong side in Taiwan. We are on the wrong side on the Korean Peninsula. We are on the wrong side in so many places. Little known fact. Let me just share this before we do the roll call. Did you know that the King of England had to step down because he was known to be a fascist sympathizer? He married Wallis Simpson. His girlfriend, his fiance, who he eventually ended up marrying, she was known to be a German intelligence asset. And the British royal family, they liked Hitler. They liked the Nazis. And the ideology of the Nazis is British Empire ideology. The idea that some races are superior to others. The British invented that. Right, the idea that that there's too many people in the world, we have to reduce the population. The British Empire invented that. The idea we should be breeding people like animals, eugenics. That's the British Empire. They believed in all that stuff. The Nazis were very much a British creation. The British were funding the Nazis to fight the communists. Holomer Schacht came into power, the financier who arranged for Hitler to come to power. Nazism is British Empire ideology. And Roosevelt, a great president that we had, who led a popular anti-fascist coalition, Roosevelt was anti-British. He was against the British Empire. And he was a lot like Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was also against the British Empire. That's the best in America. When we stand against the British Empire, when we stand with Russia, when we stand with China, when we stand against the British Empire, that's the best in America. We talk about the American way, the American people. We talk about optimism and hope and the American dream. Talk about our revolution. They do a lot to try and convince you that the American Revolution was just fought for racist reasons, just fought for slavery. Well, there were certainly people that were fighting for those reasons. But the issue in the American Revolution, from the Boston Tea Party up until the Battle of Yorktown, was, should the United States have its own economy? Or should the United States just be a trading hub, a trading post in the British global financial system? That was the issue, right? The Boston Tea Party was about the fact that the British Empire was forcing a monopoly, an international corporation, the Dutch East India Company, forcing a globalist monopolist corporation on the 13 colonies and telling them they weren't allowed to develop their own industries. They weren't allowed to become prosperous. Instead, they just needed to become a captive market for a huge multinational corporation. And the American Revolution was a coalition of different forces who wanted a strong economy in the United States. Some of them were slaveholders. Some of them were poor people who wanted land. They wanted to go out west and, get new land, and that meant killing Native Americans, of course. We don't support that, but they wanted social advancement. Some of them were industrialists. Some of them were people like Alexander Hamilton, who was an advocate of a national bank, was also an abolitionist who supported the Haitian Revolution. Oh, Small Town Voice. This is Sophia. She has a great YouTube channel, by the way. I just posted a great interview with Sophia on my YouTube channel. She is awesome. Shout out to you, Sophia. She does a lot of social media in China. She does Chinese social media. Sophia is awesome. That is a great question, Sophia. And I'm glad I'm putting it on the list right now. And I'm glad you're watching. I'm glad you are watching. And, I'm glad you're watching. And I would love to answer this question. So I just wanted to share that. Just wanted to share that as I was watching the Woody Guthrie song there. We those of us who call ourselves communists, we represent the best of the American people. We represent the tradition of John Brown and the abolitionists. We represent the tradition of the people who fought for the rights of women on the job. We represent the tradition of the civil rights marchers and of the people who burned their draft cards and refused to fight in Vietnam. We represent the tradition of the Americans who stood up against apartheid and said that Nelson Mandela was a hero, not a terrorist, as the American government called him. That's us. We represent the best in America. And that if we reject patriotism, and if we burn the American flag and we say America is an evil, racist settler country, we're handing over our history to our enemies. We should say, no, we, the progressives, the anti-imperialists, we are just as much a part of the history of this country as all the evil folks were, as all the slaveholders were, as all the racists and lynchers and warmongers were. We have a right to the history of this country. You might feel edgy and revolutionary by saying that you disown America, you hate America. You might feel edgy and revolutionary about that. But you're actually giving the country away when you do that. You're giving the country away to people like Donald Trump, to people like Joe Biden, to people like Ron DeSantis. We must own our history. We must demand that we be part of the history, because when socialism comes to America, it's not going to be Americans adopting Kim Il-sung ideology. It's not going to be Americans, becoming followers of Enver Hoxha of Albania. It's not going to be Americans adopting Sandinista ideology from Nicaragua. When socialism comes to America, socialism will be that progressive current in American history, taking power in Washington, D.C. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be the progressive, revolutionary, anti-racist, working class resistance that's always been here, taking charge, taking the wheel. There'll be a new driver in this car, and it'll be the forces of truth and justice. That is what socialism is going to be. And if you can't understand that that's what's going to be, you got a fantasy that we're all going to become Maoists or something, you are deeply, deeply mistaken. When socialism comes to America, it will be the progressive side of the American people that has always been here, that has been suppressed, that has been jailed, that has been repressed by the FBI. It'll be that side of the American people taking power. That is what socialism is going to be in America. And if you can come to think of it in those terms, you'll be moving in a right direction. David Fox wants people to join the CPI, and I want you to join the CPI also. I want you to join the Center for Political Innovation as well, right? Like I said, starting tomorrow, we are going to have a morning message of revolutionary optimism every single day. We're going to have a morning message of revolutionary optimism on the channel. The first one will be at 6 a.m. Eastern. Obviously, if you're not awake, you can catch it later. But we are having our morning messages, and we are having conferences, and we're publishing books, and we got a lot to do. So on that note, folks, we're going to do the roll call, and then I will start answering people's super chat questions. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. We got Mark in Utica, New York is with us. Welcome, Mark. Glad to have you. Mark is with us. We got Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Welcome, Lawrence. You should connect with our Chicago people. We got a lot of Chicago CPI members. We got CJ in Richmond, JT24 in Mississippi. We got Ian Foster in England. We got Patrick in Maine. We got Mohsen in Iran, Tony in Tasmania, Dan in Quebec, St. David's, Bermuda, Adam in Las Vegas, Mima in California, Sophia in Virginia. Welcome. Alan Rice in South Korea. We got Keel Jones in Durham, North Carolina, Steve and Ann in Georgia. We got Alex from Brazil. We got Gavin at one of the few American restaurants that supports Russia. I want to know which one that is. We got Tom Warrior in Switzerland. We got Bob Troy in New York, Moonlight, California Beach, Scott S., Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Ottawa in progress, Jersey, the new one, Briggy in Pennsylvania, Chris in Salt Lake City, Asswords in Charlotte, North Carolina. We got Chase in Texas. When you're in Texas, look behind you, because that's where Chase is going to be. Right? I can't get over. That was the show when I was a kid. Walker, Texas Ranger, right? And the chorus, or the theme song was, when you're in Texas, look behind you. And then it would cut to Chuck Norris, and he would say in the most non-emotive face ever, because that's where Ranger's gonna be. It was really funny. Anyway, LJ in Vancouver, Micah in Las Vegas, Maddie in California, Chris in Texas, Clinton Fraser in London, Lana in New York City. You are mysterious, Lana. I'm here in New York City as well. I'm in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. I'm curious who you are, Lana. I hope you're enjoying the show. Ahmed from Egypt. Welcome, Ahmed. Isabel from Toronto. Welcome, Isabel. Welcome. Clinton Fraser from London. Ukraine in the Melbourne, Langley, Virginia. I don't know what that means. That's a lot of different places, but there you go. Oh, it's Ukraine in the Membrane and Langley, Virginia. Okay, I thought it was Melbourne, right? Because we have so many Australian viewers. Ted Goldstein in New York. Welcome, Ted. Glad to have you, Ted. We got a lot of New York people tonight. That's good. I'm here in New York. I'm doing earlier than I usually do. I've been doing my streams at 10, but I woke up early this morning, so I wanted to do my stream a little earlier than usual. And we got the morning message tomorrow, and we're going to be doing as many morning messages as we can. It's going to be great. So there you go. All right, I'm going to start answering super chats now. What's interesting? The first super chat we have here says, attachment theory offers better analysis of emotions than Freud, and it's more scientific. Well, I'll have to look into attachment theory. One of the biggest criticisms of Freudian psychoanalysis is that, and many people have pointed this out, that there's never been an experiment, right? It's not falsifiable. And that is a fair criticism, right? That Freudianism, Freud called it scientific because back then, if you wanted to say something was new and exciting and not traditional and was modern, you called it scientific. Marx called his Marxism scientific socialism, probably for similar reasons. But many people have pointed out that Freudian psychoanalysis is not really scientific in the sense that you can't do an experiment to prove it. You can't, right? You can't do an experiment to prove the Oedipal complex. Think of how would you do an experiment like that? You can't. You can't do an experiment to prove the existence of a subconscious, right? These are theories that Freud pieced together after talking to people, right? He went around talking to people, prisoners, people in mental hospitals, wealthy people who he would work with, women who had what they called hysteria, and based on years and years of talking to people. He came up with a variety of different theories. And one of the things about Sigmund Freud that is worth pointing out, I think, it's one of the few good things Jordan Peterson has ever said, right? Jordan Peterson, I don't like in many ways, right? I mean, he's, especially when he starts talking about communism, he has no idea what he's talking about. One of the fair things, he does know his own field, psychology, well. And one of the things he said in Sigmund Freud's defense, which I think is very good, he said that everything that Freud did that was profound, we don't give him credit for. And everything we associate with Sigmund Freud is stupid. And that's true, right? When you think of Sigmund Freud, you think of him shooting up cocaine and talking about how, little children go through stages when they poop and stuff like that, right? Stuff that's like really kind of gross and sexual and ew, right? That's what you think of when you think of Freud. And you think about him using cocaine and sleeping with his patients, and that's what you think of. However, Freud invented talk therapy. There had never been any talk therapy ever, right? And now that's just accepted, right? If you commit a crime, right, and it's a minor crime, a judge might even sentence you to go to so many hours of talk therapy, right? They have guidance counselors in high schools who give kids talk therapy. It's this thing that's just now widely accepted in our culture. Well, Sigmund Freud invented that, this talking cure. He invented that. We don't give him any credit for that. And that's not a wacky thing, but we don't assume, we just kind of assume people did that, right? Oh, yeah, whatever. But it's like, he invented that. So we give him credit for that. Another thing, subconscious, the conscious and the subconscious. The idea that you have feelings that you don't put into words in your mind, right? A conscious thought, that's like words in your head. But that you have feelings, you have memories, you have stuff you're angry about, stuff you're sad about, you have fears and anxieties that you don't fully consciously recognize. You have a subconscious. Freud invented that. No one had ever said that before. Well, is that crazy? Of course not. Everyone's aware of the fact that, they've become aware they have fears they didn't acknowledge. They have anger, lingering memories of anger or sadness or we all have a subconscious. Freud invented that. And we don't think anything of that now. We just assume that. And so that's kind of how the world has been a little bit unfair to Freud. All the stuff that he said that was cuckoo, that's what we think of when we think of him. And all the stuff that he invented that was pioneering and groundbreaking, we just kind of take it for granted now. Talk therapy, subconscious, no big deal. Well, he invented that. No one had ever done that before. It was kind of a big deal when he did it. So that's what I'll say in Freud's defense. But you are absolutely right. It is not scientific. I don't know enough about this other thing that you are proposing. But the next question, which I'm going to combine into one, because it's really important, right? Liz Wheeler was on Kim Iverson's show claiming that Frankfurt School Marxists have infiltrated American education. And then Sophia, Small Town Voice, says, why is the real left replaced by the synthetic left? I'm going to do a twofer, and I'm going to answer both of those at the same time because they both need to be answered. And the answer is, and this is like, I've written books, and this has become my obsession. During the Second World War, the USA was aligned with the Soviet Union and with China against fascism. But after the war, the Cold War started. And there is an article on the CIA's website. They took it down, but you can find it on the Wayback Machine. I've cited it many times, where they brag about what they consider to be one of their most successful programs. It was called the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And what happened was, in 1949, they had the Waldorf Peace Conference in New York City. And this was a conference where many of the greatest intellectuals and scientists from around the world and musicians, Aaron Copland, the composer, Albert Einstein, the physicist, Shostakovich, the musician, all of them assembled to defend the Soviet Union and say the Soviet Union was right in World War II. and to denounce the U.S. government. And this was at a time that the Communist Party was completely illegal. People, the National Board of the Communist Party was in federal prison. The Communist Party was like completely under the gun of the FBI. But yet the Soviet Union was able to have this big conference at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City, a really fancy hotel in Manhattan, where some of the smartest people in the world got up and defended the Soviet Union. And not all of them were Communist Party members. Some of them were, but some of them were not. Some of them were just people who felt that the Soviet Union wasn't being given a fair shake. They felt that anti-communism was rooted in anti-Semitism, or they thought that some of the anti-communism in the United States was fascistic or like the Nazis. And so all these great scientists and engineers and writers and musicians gathered, and the CIA was furious. They said, how can this happen? How can so many smart people be supporting the communists? W.E.B. Du Bois, the most well-respected black writer and intellectual, was there, and so many people, right? So the CIA started giving money after that conference to fund the work of anti-communist intellectuals who were against capitalism and were critical of U.S. society, but were also against the Soviet Union. And that was the beginning of covert manipulation of leftist politics. And if you want to read a book on it, there is plenty written about it, right? And let me see if I got it on my shelf here. But there's a book called The Cultural Cold War. That's over here. The Cultural Cold War. There's a book called Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Greatest Writers. There's a book called The New York Intellectuals. I think I have that one around here somewhere. Hold on. The New York Intellectuals. It's called like The New York Intellectuals, The Rise and Fall of the Anti-Stalinist Left. I guess that's somewhere around here. But the CIA began funding leftists, if you will, who were against the Soviet Union. But it wasn't just that they were against the Soviet Union, they were against China. They were against populism. They were against mass movements. For them, leftism was an expression of intellectual alienation. If you read Eichmann in Jerusalem by Hannah Arendt, this is an essay, in the early 60s, Adolf Eichmann, a Nazi war criminal, is kidnapped from Argentina, taken to Israel, hung for his crimes against the Jewish people in the Holocaust. And Hannah Arendt, who's on the payroll of the CIA, she gets to interview him and sit in his trial, sit and watch the trial and interview him. And she writes this book, Eichmann in Jerusalem. It's like a bestseller, and it's promoted by the CIA. Hannah Arendt, this leftist, this New York leftist, writes it. And the book is all about how Adolf Eichmann was just a normal guy. He was just a normal person, because deep down, average people are Nazis. And they're dangerous. Average, normal people are really, really dangerous. So we got to control them. We gotta control them. We got to protect the great intellectuals from average working people, because deep down, they're all just a bunch of bloodthirsty Nazis. Right? It's this elitist screed that she writes. And on the surface, it looks like a condemnation of conformity. Right? It's a warning against being a conformist. It's a warning against just going along with the crowd. You would think it was that, but it's not. If you really get down to it, it's just hatred for average people. Average people are all just a bunch of Nazis. No scientific understanding of where fascism came from, how fascism was rooted in the problem of overproduction and the breakdown of capitalism. None of that. No. It's just fascism happened because these inferior rabble, the normal people, got together and were building a mass movement. And of course, Hannah Arendt equated Nazi Germany with the Soviet Union, said they were the same system, wrote a book about totalitarianism. And that what you can call the Frankfurt School, right? We always hear about the Frankfurt School. Well, the Frankfurt School, that was Herbert Marcuse, who had worked as a U.S. government propagandist during World War II. He had been employed by the Department of War Information. Right, he was a propagandist for the American government. After World War II, he moved to Germany, and he became this big Marxist intellectual. Theodor Adorno. He was also hired, and he wrote The Authoritarian Personality Study. And all of them were being paid by the CIA. They were being paid because of the magazine Der Monat. Right? The magazine, this was a magazine that the CIA published in West Germany called Der Monat, which means Monday. And it was called Monday. It was like a weekly magazine that came out every Monday. It was called Monday, Der Monat. And Der Monat, this magazine that came out, it was CIA subsidized. CIA paid for it. And it paid lots of money to Theodor Adorno and Herbert Marcuse and other people to reinvent Marxism. And that's what they did. They completely reinvented Marxism. If you read Theodor Adorno, which I have it here, right? I've got The Authoritarian Personality by Theodor Adorno. This is not Marxism. This is not Marxism. I mean, this has nothing to do with Gus Hall and the workers seizing their factories. This has nothing to do with Mao and the mountains. It has nothing to do with Stalin. This is about how there's certain people who have a personality that makes them more conforming, and they're really dangerous. There's certain people who want to live for a higher purpose, who think right and wrong exists, and they're really, really dangerous. We got to stop them. And it's just weird psychological analysis leading to the conclusion that there's certain people who potentially might join a mass movement, who don't see everything in terms of shades of gray, who do believe in right and wrong and would sacrifice for a higher purpose, and they're really, really dangerous. That's what this is. That's what this book is. And that's not Marxism. I don't know what that is. But Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto, he wrote that our movement is a movement of the immense majority, on behalf of the immense majority. And all other previous political movements have been fighting for minorities, but we're fighting for the mass majority. Well, those folks hate the majority. In their mind, the majority is dangerous. And it's about breaking down any group of, any notion of group identity, any collectivism, breaking down and atomizing. Monat means month. It's the month. I'm sorry, not Monday. Sorry, got confused. It's about breaking down and atomizing individuals. Breaking down any sense of collectivism or group identity. That's what it's about. Now, part of the reason that the synthetic left flourished, and this is getting to answer Sophia's question, part of the reason the synthetic left flourished is because of the fact that after World War II, there was a huge economic expansion in the United States. And the main way the communists had organized had been building labor unions. They'd been fighting around economic issues, unemployment councils, etc. Well, there was a huge boom in the 1950s. And so class struggle was not something average Americans wanted to hear. Their living standards were rising. Their living standards were going up. So the class struggle wasn't an issue. Leftism kind of left, and it left working class neighborhoods and communities. It was easy to isolate the Communist Party because the economy was so good. Leftism increasingly became a thing that only kind of alienated intellectuals, people who didn't fit in with U.S. society, people that didn't like Cold War conformity. It increasingly became something that alienated middle-class intellectuals, turned to young people who didn't want to serve in the military or didn't like the conformity or the discipline of their schools or whatever. That leftism, because there was not an economic crisis as there had been in the 30s, because the U.S. economy was very stable during the post-World War II economic expansion, it was very easy for the spaces where communists still had influence, the intellectual spaces, to be infiltrated by this stuff. And they invented this stuff. And I argue the synthetic left was 3 stages. It was first an operation to push genuine communism and Marxism into the background, to kind of fill the void, to replace genuine communism and Marxism in the West. And it was, they had Partisan Review magazine in the United States, Susan Sontag, Hannah Arendt, Irving Howe. Irving Kristol was the director of the CIA program. He eventually became the father of neoconservatism. That's how it started. And then in Britain, they had Encounter magazine. And in Germany, they had Der Monat. In Paris, they had the Paris Review. And it was about creating an intellectual alternative so that if you became an alienated intellectual, you were angry at U.S. society, you didn't fit in, you went to them, not to the communists. That was the first stage. The second stage started really with the Prague Spring, 1968 in Czechoslovakia. You had an uprising against the Soviet Union, right? You had a leader who came to power in Czechoslovakia named Dubček. Dubček was anti-Soviet. He was against the Soviet Union. He cut off aid to the Vietnamese National Liberation Front, and he was a pro-American communist leader who came into power. And he said he was against Marxism, Leninism. He was in favor of socialism with a human face, or democratic socialism. And he was hoping to position himself to align with the United States against the Soviet Union, cut off aid to the Vietnamese, etc. So the Soviet Union sent its military in to remove Dubček and to install a pro-Soviet, anti-imperialist leader. The young people who supported Dubček presented themselves like hippies. They were young intellectuals. They were this strata in Soviet society, people that were privileged. They went to the universities. They were often the children of the Communist Party elite. But they were enamored by Western movies. They loved American movies. They loved American television. They loved Beatles music. And if you had gone to those people, those kind of privileged, the rich kids of Prague, the rich kids of the Eastern Bloc, if you'd have gone to them and said, we want capitalism, they would have said, no, our parents are communists. We remember World War II. They weren't completely against communism, but they had grievances. And so the CIA realized in order to court and manipulate intellectuals in the Eastern Bloc, this synthetic left stuff was very effective. They would say to them, oh, we're not against communism either. We're just for democratic socialism. We're just for communism with more human rights. Oh, we're just for, LGBT, and it was a way of maneuvering. Because if they'd have gone and tried to organize and manipulate these young intellectuals and done so in the name of straight up anti-communism, it wouldn't have worked. So they did it in the name of this kind of middle-class individualism. But it was all being directed by the CIA, but it confused people. And that was the second stage, is they used the synthetic left in the socialist countries. And the culmination of this was 1989. 1989, 1990, 1991, they overthrew the entire Eastern Bloc. Czechoslovakia, Romania, Poland, East Germany, they were all being overthrown. Albania, they were all being overthrown. All the communist governments were being overthrown. And what would happen is they would get all these young people who said they weren't against communism to go out and protest, and they were often the children of the party elite. Right. And they would go out and, sing Give Peace a Chance, and they'd have their flowers and they'd say, we want freedom. We just want freedom. Right. And they were the children of the party elite, and the police would be afraid to beat them up because they're going to beat up the son of the head of the Communist Party. The police would often be afraid to beat them up and would join with them. There'd be a faction within the Communist Party that would kind of support them. And these young people, they would be the public relations face of it. And all the TV cameras from CNN and whatever would surround them, and they'd be singing, oh, we're just hippies. We believe in human rights and freedom. I can't believe. And meanwhile, there'd be a section of the military that would be bought off by the American government. There'd be a section of the military that would just then stage a coup and seize power and overthrow socialism, and the United States would take control of the country. And this was the color revolution formula. That you use the synthetic left, you use the young, confused intellectuals, and you don't tell them what it's really about. You make it vague. Aren't you for human rights? I'm for human rights. Who's against human rights? Aren't you for democracy? Aren't you against corruption? They make it vague. And these young people, oh, they're just for this. Meanwhile, they would overthrow the government. And this was a winning formula. This is what you call a color revolution. Worked everywhere except China. Didn't work in China. They tried it in 1989 in China, Tiananmen Square, and it failed miserably. I mean, I shouldn't say it failed miserably. It came pretty close, but it failed. right? It failed because Deng Xiaoping had won over the support of those intellectuals. Enough of them had been able to open their own businesses, etc., that loyalty to the party existed, and that, you know, the young people were in Tiananmen Square. They now we have the documents, right? WikiLeaks has revealed there wasn't a massacre in the square. The young people peacefully dispersed, right? There wasn't a massacre in the square. They peacefully dispersed, and then there was 2 weeks of violence in other parts of Beijing. There was armed battles going on. Sections of the military were fighting other sections of the military. There were snipers on the roofs of buildings. There were, you know, armored vehicles being turned over. And for like 2 weeks in Beijing, there was an armed conflict between one section of the People's Liberation Army and the other, right? That was clear. And that there were armed groups, and that there was a military confrontation, you know, that happened in the aftermath of the Tiananmen protests. But the coup didn't succeed, right? The students peacefully dispersed, and then there was violence afterwards. But the attempted coup that probably happened, there was like an attempted seizure of power by one section of the military that was pro-US. That attempted seizure of power failed. The Chinese Communist Party stayed in power. They did not have a color revolution. And I would argue that's because of Deng Xiaoping. It's because of the market reforms, right? That the young intellectuals, many of them were still loyal to the party, right? Many people who were alienated by Mao and were alienated by the Gang of Four, they could handle Deng Xiaoping. They might have criticisms, but there was enough of a section among the population and among the leadership of the party that weren't going to go along with the coup. And so the coup failed, and the Chinese Communist Party stayed in power. But that was stage 2, was the color revolutions. And they, you know, based on their success in Eastern Europe, they went global with this. And they set up all kinds of nonprofits and NGOs. And, you know, I mean, they have Color Revolution Incorporated practically. They have built all kinds of foundations, the Albert Einstein Institute, and oh my God, there's a million of them, right? You know, and there's, you know, what is it? You know, George Soros started out, he set up like art galleries and other things that happened, you know, and, you know, that were being, you know, set up around in the Eastern Bloc that helped funnel money to these intellectuals by sponsoring their art shows, etc. And George Soros, you know, he became the master of this, and this happened in country after country after country. All over the world, there are color revolutions now. They follow this model. You have a peaceful protest movement that, what's it about? They don't really know what it's about. It's just kind of a movement, and people are out there, and it sets the stage for a coup. That was Euromaidan in 2014, the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, Euromaidan. That was the Arab Spring, you know, the overthrow of Gaddafi. You know, many examples of this. So that was stage 2. Stage 3 of the synthetic left is that in the aftermath of the financial crisis, you remember the U.S. economy crashed. Barack Obama came in on a white horse to save the U.S. economy. And he wanted to, you know, pass some modest reforms to stabilize the U.S. economy. And they couldn't do it, right? Because the Tea Party, the lower levels of capital, fought them, right? That the ultra rich, Warren Buffett and, you know, the BP and Shell and Chevron and Silicon Valley and Facebook and Twitter, they were set to help Barack Obama stabilize the U.S. economy with degrowth, right? They wanted essentially to start implementing degrowth in the U.S. economy, right? That's what they wanted to do. And they wanted to pass some like stabilizing government controls over the economy, but they really wanted to push degrowth, Malthusianism to save the U.S. economy. But they couldn't do it because the Tea Party, the Tea Party was out there calling Obama a communist. Obama's a crazy communist, Muslim fascist. Oh my God. And they thought Obamacare was communism and whatever. And so the Democrats realized that if they were going to stabilize U.S. society and the economic crisis, they were going to need foot soldiers. They're going to need a mass movement of their own to kind of come in and force the sections of the U.S. ruling class that would oppose them, like the fracking companies, like the like the Koch brothers, like the there's many like Betsy DeVos of Black, her brother is Eric Prince of Blackwater. There's many wealthy capitalists who are not part of the club. We're fighting Obama, fighting any economic reforms, to come in and force them to go along with it. They brought the color revolution apparatus home. And I witnessed this because I was part of Occupy Wall Street. And Occupy Wall Street was the beginning of this, right? Black Lives Matter came later. And what you can now call wokeism is the third stage, right? It's the color revolution apparatus has come back to the United States. And all these NGOs and nonprofits and well-funded outlets, that fund protest and human rights, they have this whole ideology called wokeism that has nothing to do with Marxism. It says growth is bad, that they push postmodernism, the idea that there is no truth, that truth is inherently totalitarian. You can't be a totalitarian neo-Marxist. You can't be a postmodern neo-Marxist, right? That's a term that Jordan Peterson uses a lot. Well, the postmodern neo-Marxists. Postmodernism says there is no truth. It says that any attempt to put forward a grand narrative of human history is totalitarian. Marxism is an ideology that believes there is objective reality, right? There is only the material world, and it gives, through historical materialism, a narrative of human history. That's Marxism. So you can't be a postmodern Marxist. They don't go together. The synthetic left draws from Marxism because it's a vehicle for deconstruction, right? Marxism is useful in taking apart the myths of U.S. society. That's it. They don't want to replace the myths of U.S. society with Marxism. They just want to deconstruct. So they will draw from Marxism when it's useful for deconstruction. And I'll talk about that too, because there's other super chats on that question, right? This is another one. James Turner. Many conservatives say that Marxism is against the nuclear family. What is your response to that? Well, here's the thing, right? Before there was the nuclear family, there was the Soviet family. Go and read Thermidor in the Family. Go and read Leon Trotsky in his attack on Stalin, the book he wrote, Revolution Betrayed. Leon Trotsky wrote this whole book attacking Stalin called The Revolution Betrayed. And one of the things that Trotsky attacks Stalin for, do I have it here? I think I might even have it here. One of the things that Trotsky attacks Stalin for is what he calls the Soviet family. Yeah, here we go. Got it. All right. Oh, no, that's the permanent revolution. Oh, but I don't. Do I have it? Okay. I thought I had a copy of The Revolution Betrayed. I have the Permanent Revolution. I don't have The Revolution Betrayed. But anyway, in The Revolution Betrayed, there's a whole section called The Thermidor in the Family. Here, I'll send you the link. Thermidor in the Family. And he goes on about how the Soviet government in the 1930s was promoting the Soviet family. That they were promoting the Soviet family. And what was the Soviet family? It was a mother and a father and at least 3 children. And in fact, they gave medals to women who had more than 1 child. And Trotsky's ranting about this. And they outlawed abortion in the Soviet Union. They outlawed homosexuality in the Soviet Union, right? And Trotsky is complaining. He writes about the Thermidor in the Family. And basically what he's writing is that the Soviet Union, it was a huge synthesis. You had the Bolsheviks that were the most radical far-left people, right? And Anastasia Kollontai, or is it Alexandria Kollontai? Others that wanted to abolish marriage. That they had the glass of water theory, that having sex should be as meaningless as drinking a glass of water. They were promoting free love. They were the most radical, feminist, deconstructionist, free love, free sex, whatever. But then you have the Soviet peasantry that are deeply conservative, for thousands of years. You know, they're deeply conservative, deeply religious. What the Soviet Union came to be, what Stalin created, was a synthesis. It was a compromise between those two things. On the one hand, women got education. Women worked in factories alongside men. They invented daycare so that women didn't have to stay home and raise the kids. They had collective kitchens where people could get their food. They basically invented fast food so women didn't have to cook, right? And that, you know, women became electrical engineers. Women became generals in the army. Like, women were being empowered, but they still promoted a family, a husband and a wife, and they encouraged people to have children. And if a woman had more than 10 children, she got a medal. She was considered a mother of the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union, the Soviet family was a compromise, right? On the one hand, it was very radical. Women are being empowered. Women can get divorced. Women can run for office. Women can vote, etc. But on the other hand, it's not the Bolsheviks. It's not abolishing marriage. It's not free love and free sex and everyone can do what they want. They outlawed abortion. They outlawed homosexuality. It was this synthesis. That's what the Soviet Union had. It was the Soviet family. And they had posters promoting the new Soviet family. They'd have the father, and he's a military guy, and they have the woman, and she's got like a drill. She's an electrical engineer, and they got 3 kids. It was a big public relations campaign. Stalin promoted it everywhere. The Soviet family. And it was like your obligation to have at least 2 children, right? Because you had to replace the parents, but you needed to have a 3rd child because we needed more people, right? And the Soviet family came before the nuclear family. The nuclear family in the United States, the nuclear family comes during the Cold War. It comes in the 50s, and that was during the economic boom in the United States, during the post-World War II economic expansion. You got the nuclear family. Well, the Soviets had already done that. They had the Soviet family. Trotsky rightly points out that the Soviet family was not this radical feminist, free love, whatever. It wasn't. It was a compromise with traditional conservative Russian way of doing things and the radical left Bolsheviks. It was a synthesis. But this idea that the transgender thing was invented by the Soviet Union is cockamamie malarkey. Until the 1980s, it was standard. Most communists in the world thought that homosexuality was a disease from capitalism. Did you know this? If you went to the Soviet Union, you would ask them, do you have homosexuality here? They'd say, no, that's a disease from capitalism. We don't have any such thing. You went to Cuba, you'd say, is there homosexuality here? They'd say, no, we don't have that here. We got rid of that with the revolution. We're a socialist society. We don't have any of that. Right? Communists, this idea that the transgender thing is a big conspiracy by Marxists. People need to understand that CIA Marxism on your college campus that Kim Iverson talks about, and the Soviet Union and China and North Korea and Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua are night and day. They're 2 different things, okay? They're not the same thing. And it infuriates me. It absolutely infuriates me that on the one hand, the woke left are the most pro-war. They want to overthrow all these governments. They hate China. They hate Russia. They call me a Nazi because I defend China, because I defend Russia, because I defend Cuba, because I defend these countries. They call me a Nazi on the one hand. And then you have the right wing, the Donald Trump supporters, who have it in their head that somehow this mob of people who want to destroy Russia with nuclear weapons and think populism is fascism and think that advocating Medicare for all is a class reductionist, evil thing, that they're the same as Mao. They're the same as Kim Il-sung. They're the same. They're not, right? Wokeism is a completely different creation that has absolutely nothing to do with the genuine left. And Marxism, when it comes to the Marxist teaching on the family, let's talk about this. If you read The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State by Frederick Engels, that is considered the key Marxist work on the history of the family. It's by Frederick Engels, The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State. In that book, Engels points out Then in hunter-gatherer civilization, you had people living in tribes of 25 to 30 people. And the original human beings that were hunter-gatherers, there wasn't exactly a family unit. The whole tribe was kind of a family. You had couples sometimes, but they didn't keep track of whose kid was whose kid. Every kid belonged to the whole tribe, and they tended to worship women because women had babies, and so they worshiped some kind of goddess, mother, goddess, deity, and that was hunter-gatherer civilization. And then with the origin of private property, suddenly the word familia comes from ancient Rome, and it refers to a man and all of his property, his house, his slaves, his wives. There's one Roman citizen who owns land. His familia was everything he owned. And that was human chattel property, basically. That included his wives. That included his slaves. And that's what the word originally meant. And in most civilizations throughout the world, a man could have many different wives. And that was considered acceptable because, women couldn't have more than one wife. Women were considered to be property. But men, men were citizens, landowners. Men from the ruling class could have as many wives as they wanted, right? And that was the patriarchal way of doing things. Well, as we move ahead, as we get to feudalism in Europe, things changed. And as feudalism goes into Europe, now all of a sudden, only one wife. Monogamy, right? No. We don't do polygamy anymore. The Catholic Church is saying, no, you can only have one wife. The rule gets changed, and they say you can only have one wife, right? And that's, European civilization is premised on, you can only have one wife, but she's got to be female, one man, one woman, and no divorce, and, unless there's adultery or whatever, that's medieval Europe, right? Well, now you'll notice that now there's gay marriage. We're starting to have gay marriage. Right? The United States, most Western countries now have gay marriage. Well, what this shows is that what conservatives believe, which is that there is one sacred way, that the nuclear family is sacred and eternal, that's not true. Right? Families are different in different cultures, different civilizations. That's what Marxism shows. And that as the economic base of society changes, the superstructure also changes. Right? That under feudalism, the family was one way. Under capitalism, it's another way. Under primitive communism, it's another way. That's all communism says about the family, is that it changes based on, as the economic base of society changes, the family also changes. That's it. And the synthetic left finds that useful because it deconstructs things. But what the synthetic left does that Marxism never does is the synthetic left attempts to not change the economic base of society, right? Because that's fascism, right? A centrally planned economy is Nazi. Oh, no, you can't do that, right? So they don't want to change the economic base of society. They still want to have production for profit. They still want to have profits in command. But from above, from the universities, we're going to teach everyone that the family is bad. We're going to teach everyone that gender is bad and that, we're going to have kids not know what their gender is, and not reveal their gender until they're 14 or something like that. Right? We're going to tell everyone that gender is oppressive. We need to get rid of gender because it's this oppressive thing. We need to, get rid of the family. That's not in Marxism. That's no communist country has ever done that. Ever. Right? Ever. That has never been done. Number one, no communist government in the world has ever done that. Marx never calls for that. Right? I mean, you read in the Communist Manifesto where he talks about, liberating parents from their children or whatever. But he's not saying that under capitalism, we have the universities and the government actively try to deconstruct gender. Marx never says that. Marx is concerned about the workers rising up and controlling the means of production. And he argues that things like the family, things like gender roles, gender stereotypes are different in different societies. That's all Marx says. But the synthetic left, they reject the important stuff, the bulk of what Marx is saying about capitalism having this problem called overproduction and the tendency of the falling rate of profit and technology leading to an economic crisis, like all the important things that Marx says, all the stuff he spends pages talking about in the Communist Manifesto, they don't care about that. They fixate on, yes, Marx says the family is not eternal, so therefore the family is an oppressive institution, so therefore gender roles are not stagnant, so gender is oppression. And so under capitalism, without changing any of the base of society, what we're going to do is we're going to teach everyone that it is their moral duty to go around deconstructing gender roles, deconstructing the family, not getting married. That is not Marxism. That is not Marxism. Empowering women, you could argue that that is Marxism. And, empowering LGBT people, ending discrimination against LGBT people. A lot of Marxists fought for that, even though the communist governments weren't really on board with that until like the 80s. East Germany was pretty pro-LGBT, and then eventually now Cuba is very pro-LGBT. But even today, the majority of communists in the world are not in favor of that. But, many of the early gay rights marchers, Leslie Feinberg, Harry Hay were Marxists, and that, an argument can be made there, okay? But this notion that with the universities, under capitalism, we are going to try and deconstruct all notion of gender, deconstruct the notion of the family, and impose what we think is somehow more egalitarian. That is not Marxism. I don't know what that is. It's something that the CIA invented. It has nothing to do with what Che Guevara was fighting in the mountains for. It has nothing to do with what Stalin defeated Hitler, and mobilized the 5-year plans to industrialize Russia for. It has absolutely nothing to do with communism, right? And if you go to any communist country, if you went to North Korea and you said, hey, we're going to get rid of families, we think families are oppressive, and we want to tell children they don't have to be a boy or a girl, that we're going to say gender is this oppressive thing made up to oppress them, they would look at you like you're crazy. You went to China and you did that. You went, you said, oh, we're not going to have families anymore, and we're going to tell boys and girls that they're not boys and girls when, and they're going to tell you're crazy. It's one thing to say that gay people should be allowed to live their lives. It's also another thing to say that trans people should be allowed to live their lives. And I'm against bullying. I'm against discrimination. I don't think that anyone should be bullied or made to be ashamed of who they are or what their sexual desires may be, or, and I think gay people should be allowed to get married. We don't have a religious government in America, right? We don't have a state religion. So, you have to allow gay marriage, right? If we outlaw gay marriage, what are we going to outlaw next? We're going to have to outlaw divorce because some religions don't believe in divorce, right? You can't legislate morality, and you can't legislate in our system, right? You cannot have religion-based laws, right? If we were an Islamic government, if we were a Catholic government, maybe you could make that argument. But in the United States of America, where we have the separation of church and state, you can't outlaw gay marriage. Gay marriage has to be legal, right? It has to be legal, right? So it's one thing to argue you need a secular government. Homosexuality should be legal. We shouldn't discriminate against people. If people are trans or people are gay, they should have the right to be that way. I'm on board with you 100% on that. But this idea that it is our moral obligation to deconstruct the traditional family, that is not Marxism. What do you think, Sophia? Am I on point? Do you get what I'm saying? I'm repeating myself a lot, but, something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. So there you go. I hope I got this. I'd be curious your thoughts. But anyway, got one last super chat. Thanks to the OG synth left rad lib John Lennon. All anyone knows about the Red Book, all anyone knows about it is that it's hard for you to score. Well, that song that John Lennon recorded, it's called Revolution. It's called Revolution. And he recorded it, and he clarified what he meant when he gave an interview to Red Mole, which was the newspaper run by Tariq Ali. And John Lennon was sympathetic to Trotskyism. He gave a lot of money to the Workers' Revolutionary Party of Jerry Healy. And in that interview, he clarified that what he meant was if you wave Mao in people's faces and you go out of your way to be just communist, people are going to be confused by it, and they're not, he was critiquing the way certain communist groups in Britain that were really into the Mao aesthetics were operating. And that, I guess, the story that John Lennon tells about how he wrote the song was that he wanted to write a song advocating revolution, but instead he ended up sitting down writing an anti-revolutionary song. That it came out anti-revolution. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, the Beatles, there's a whole lot of investigation into where their music came from and stuff like that. And the Beatles, whatever. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I will say that in the movie Across the Universe, which is this, this like musical they made about the 1960s that, has like Beatles songs in it. It is an awful movie. I had high expectations for the movie. It was a horrendous movie. It was just an attack on the left. I mean, it was ridiculous. And when they're playing that song, that John Lennon, it's like the leader of the anti-war protest group, he just looks like a hippie. And then the main character breaks open his office and reveals he's got a picture of Chairman Mao, on that line, like, bum, 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 he's a communist. And that was just so ridiculous. That was an awful movie. Across the Universe was a horrible movie. It was horrible, politically horrible, anti-communist. Basically the idea was that all the anti-Vietnam War protesters, all the Maoists, they all blow themselves up and they're all weathermen or something like that. I mean, it was horrible. It was a horrible film, and it was a horrible movie. They portrayed it in an anti-communist way. Look, my understanding is that John Lennon had a phase where he was sympathetic to Trotskyism. He was hanging out with Jerry Healy and Vanessa Redgrave of the Workers' Revolutionary Party, the Trotskyite group, but they were sympathetic to Palestine. They were sympathetic to Libya, etc. And that he donated to the Black Panthers as well. And then he made an album. There's an album that John Lennon made called Sometime in New York City. And almost every song on the album is communist. Almost every single song, or is about some cause. There's a song for Angela Davis. There's a song for Attica State. There's a song supporting the IRA. The title track is "Woman is the N-word of the world." That's the opening track of the album. And that Jerry Rubin, the 1960s radical, was apparently hanging out with John Lennon a lot and was advising him. And that many of the fans didn't like the album, right? The music was, subpar, but John Lennon was doing that. The other thing was that John Lennon was a huge promoter of drugs, right? And that there was a huge effort by the U.S. government to fill leftist spaces with drugs. There's a great book called Drugs as Weapons Against Us. Communists have always opposed drug use, Early socialists didn't even drink alcohol. John Reed, the movie Reds is about, he was a teetotaler. He did not drink, right? And Eugene Debs and a lot of those people didn't drink alcohol at all because they thought alcohol was a tool of the bosses. There's a great book, Drugs as Weapons Against Us. I would recommend checking that out. And there was a huge effort by the American government to fill activist, leftist spaces with drugs. John Lennon was constantly doing interviews on TV, promoting drug use. And that was MK Ultra. And many people believe, and I believe it's documented in these books, that the CIA approached these various film stars and, film stars, rock stars, and encouraged them to promote drug use. And the other thing is that, from what I understand, that John Lennon, he had issues with his visa. They tried to block him from staying in the United States. They argued he was meddling in American politics with his activism. So he made a deal in the early 70s to not engage in political protest in order to get his green card. And that basically what it came down to is in 1972, Richard Nixon was running for re-election. And John Lennon had planned he was going to play at the Republican National Convention, at the protest outside the Republican National Convention, which he was one of the Beatles. There would have been thousands and thousands of people there. And so the Nixon administration was really afraid that there would be thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who would come out to see John Lennon, one of the Beatles, and then they would riot and attack the Republican convention. So basically, they threatened John Lennon with deportation, and he agreed to not play to protest the Republican convention in exchange for getting his green card. And then he kind of disappeared shortly after that. He kind of dropped out of politics. And what's very interesting, make of this what you will. What's very interesting is that John Lennon was he was kind of invisible, right? And, he didn't do much. He didn't record many albums. He was just kind of vanished from the public life. He lived in the Dakota Building near Central Park in New York City, and he was raising his son, and he was married to Yoko Ono, and he was kind of out of public life. People didn't hear from him. He wasn't doing interviews. He was just, he was out of public life. Ronald Reagan got elected in 1980. Ronald Reagan won the 1980 election in a landslide. And right as Ronald Reagan won his election, John Lennon reappeared. He relaunched his career, and he put out the first album he had put out in 6 years, and it was called Double Fantasy. And he was doing interviews again, and then he was shot. And many people look at the fight, and if you go read my book, read my book. You got to go read my book, Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution, Where is America Going? I have a timeline of events from 1978 to 1981. The timing of John Lennon's death is very odd because there was a fight going on in the ruling class. The transition from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan was not smooth. There was a fight in the ruling class, right? The Jimmy Carter Eastern establishment, Brzezinski, Soros, those kind of people were on one side, and John Lennon was on the other side. Or John Lennon was with those folks against Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was the military-industrial complex. Ronald Reagan was, the hard right wing. And there was a fight in the ruling class. And John Lennon's assassination fits into it. And one thing that many people have pointed out, and this is odd, I don't even know what to make of this, right? The assassination of John Lennon, it happened, I believe, in December of 1980. Right? Was it December of 1980? When was John Lennon killed? When was John Lennon shot? He was killed, yes, December 8th, 1980. John Lennon was shot. Well, just a few months later, March 30th, 1981, just shortly after he took office, Ronald Reagan was shot. And what is fascinating, first of all, it's infuriating. As I see someone's already saying, don't think, conspiracy theory. I didn't say anything, right? I'm not putting forward a theory, my friend. I'm just telling you the facts here, right? Was John Lennon shot on December 8th, 1980? Yes. Was Ronald Reagan shot in March of 1981? Yes. I'm just telling you the facts, right? Both of those assassins listed the book Catcher in the Rye as their inspiration, which is weird as hell. Weird as hell. The guy who shot Ronald Reagan was found not guilty for reasons of insanity. And instead of going to prison, he spent the rest of his life, until recently, he just got out, in a private mental health facility. And now he's been let out. John Hinckley, who shot Ronald Reagan, they have let him out of this mental health facility he's been in. He's from a wealthy family, very, very wealthy family, oil banker, oil company exec dad. He was mentally ill, crazy guy who called himself a songwriter or whatever. They put him in He was found not guilty for reasons of insanity. The jury acquitted him, which never happens. Juries do not acquit people in federal court. It just doesn't happen, right? But then on top of that, they found him not guilty for reasons of insanity. And so his rich family arranged for him to go to a private mental health facility. Not a government facility, but a private mental health facility where he's been at. They just let him out, the guy who shot but failed to kill Ronald Reagan. They just let him out. And he's allowed to have a YouTube channel. He actually has a YouTube channel where he plays his songs, but he's not allowed to talk about politics. Not allowed to give any interviews about why he did what he did. He's not allowed. He's got a whole list of people he's not allowed to contact. His web browsing history is monitored regularly by the court. So he's free now, the guy who shot Ronald Reagan, but he's not allowed to tell anybody why he did what he did. That is weird as hell. That is weird as hell. And if that doesn't strike you as weird as hell, if you think that, if you throw conspiracy theory in front of something, is there anything I just said there, Mark, that's not true? Right? Now, if I said, and that this proves that the Illuminati did it, and then you could say something. But all I'm saying is that if you look at the facts of that assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, it's weird as hell. It's weird as hell. It's absolutely weird as hell. It's weird as hell. Deny it all you want, but it's weird as hell. And, and the assassination of John Lennon shortly beforehand, and the fact that both of the killers listed Catcher in the Rye, which is a very strange novel. Read Catcher in the Rye. I've read it. It's a very strange novel about a boy who's sad about his brother dying, and he wanders around New York City. It's very weird. J.D. Salinger, very strange. The whole thing is very strange. The whole thing is very, very, very strange. And if you want to call that a conspiracy theory, I'm not proposing any conspiracy. I'm just pointing to the facts here and saying, this is weird. This is weird. Right? So, right? There you go. There you go. All right, folks. Well, I'm going to end tonight's stream. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for our morning message. We're going to have one every morning from a different CPI member. I guess I'm going to put on the closing music. It's been fun. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.